qua non ci deve essere più niente. Bisogna cominciare subito. Coraggio, al lavoro, buttate giù. Dico bene, dottore?
Sì, grazie. Arrivederci, ragazzi. Ci vediamo in un prossimo film.
Lo speriamo.
Ciao, marinai.
Welcome to Cinema Italia, a podcast dedicated to the world of Italian cinema. Presented by me, John Bleasdale. I'm going to do that again because I started an octave too high, I think. I don't think I'll be able to sustain that for the entire song. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Italia. My name is John Bleasdale, and my fellow host is
Nicholas Bell,
who is a writer for Eye on Cinema and Spin, as well as the YouTube channel Fish Jelly, which I've just this minute realized what you've done then, because I was tempted to say jellyfish, but of course you've done something clever there.
Yes, which was started out as something fun to work on with my husband. And I don't think we thought anybody would listen, but it's turned out to be quite lucrative. So there we go. And it's a reference to a song by Destiny's Child called Bootylicious. So that's we were just trying to have fun with something, and now we that is the name.
Right? Yeah, it's like the Beatles. You're stuck with it now.
We are, so it is what it is.
Well, it worked out for them. I'm sure it's working out. It sounds like it's working out for you as well.
Oh yes, and it's still something that we ultimately enjoy doing. So there you are.
That's the most important thing. Today, we are going to be talking about Salvatore Giuliano, the classic film, one of the recognized classics of Italian cinema, I think, by Francesco Rosi. This is coming from what year is this, Nick?
I believe it's 1962, and he had 3 features before this. And this was the one that made him. I think he won Best Director at Berlin. And then, this is my second watch. I watched it in preparation about a year ago for a recording we did on the Mattei affair.
Yeah, which is one of my favorite Italian films of all time. I love that film. And I love this film.
A different kind of film, but yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of noticing some similarities because I think I watched them. This is my second, maybe my third time of watching this. I think the first time you watch it, it's a film which is very much set on disappointing your expectations or swerving away from those expectations. And so the next time you watch it, you're prepared for that, and you're not going, oh, wait a minute, it's like watching Psycho for the second time and thinking Janet Leigh's not getting to the end of this movie.
Yes, you get beyond like, oh, she died. I actually agree with that too, because I knew who this person was vaguely because of a Michael Cimino film probably, but I remember watching it the first time and kept saying, like, well, where is he? Are we going to see him? Is he Salvatore?
Yeah. Which one is the guy? And it's kind of funny that okay, so let me give you the basic plot, or let's give the listeners the basic plot. If plot it is, I mean, this is the true story of a Sicilian brigand and outlaw who to some degree was political, was part of the separatist movement in the 1940s, was to some degree supported by the English and American forces when he was obviously fighting the fascists and the national government, but then ended up fighting the restored government, the Republic. There is an element where he was perhaps colluding with the mafia and the forces of order, which in Italy is a little bit complicated because you have the police, which is similar to the police that you have in Britain and the US, but then you also have this other form of sort of military police called the Carabinieri, who take their name from the carbines that they would be carrying, and these are part of the army, and so a branch of the military. Always give you the slight impression, I live in Italy, and so I always get the slight impression that whereas in England I would feel very comfortable going up to a policeman and asking him the directions, for instance, if you went up to a Carabinieri and asked them the directions, I'm sure they'd help you, but my impression is that that's not actually what they're for, and they might even be offended that you would do that. And so that anyway, so there's a little bit of complexity between those two bodies, and that becomes important later on in the story because he might be working with one or other or both of those groups. This is a film told in flashback. It begins with his corpse, and we reconstruct his career. And as you say, you are left wondering, wait a minute, are we ever going to see this guy?
Right. I think in the U.S., I wanted to comment quickly based on, the fascist regime that we're dealing with over here right now. But the Carabinieri, it's not completely the same, I believe, but kind of like how you're talking about how you probably wouldn't want to go talk to one of them and ask them for directions. Well, not like what ICE is doing in the U.S. This government federal arm of law enforcement that has a completely different agenda, perhaps. But yes, so you're watching. I'm watching this film for the first time. I remember a titular character. Usually, a titular character you never see. It had that noir element a little bit, like Laura or Rebecca, this woman that we're all wondering about that we're never going to see. But yeah, Salvatore Giuliano, he doesn't come up. So you're listening to a lot of conversations that I think if you have no idea about Italian history or politics, it can be a little disorienting even. Like trying to figure out who's what and why are they talking about that and why do they care?
Yeah, exactly. But I think the thing that Rosi does, which is stunning actually, is that he makes we are looking at his body right at the beginning, and also not only are we looking at his body, everybody is looking at his body. The houses, people are hanging out the windows looking at his body. They're doing a kind of anatomy of him. They're sort of, okay, he's got a ring on this finger, he's wearing a white vest, he's wearing striped cotton socks, and so there's this meticulous detailing of his physical presence, but of course he's dead, so he's absent, he's not there. And then the history of his life at that point continues in a similar way. And of course, when you rewatch it, you do realize, oh, actually, he appears in the film quite a lot, but he's always got his face covered or his back to the camera, or he's often got binoculars on his face, which is ironic again because he's looking and we're not allowed to look. He's
yes,
and there's a really brilliant scene which just blew me away today. A very important moment in the film where the camera just lingers on a mountain, and he's a bandit of the mountains. That's his strength. He knows the territory, and the police and the Carabinieri don't. They can only occupy villages in the valleys. And there's a moment where, before something very dramatic happens, the camera just rests on the mountain as if Salvatore Giuliano is the mountain. Just having that in view means, he's here. What are these people thinking that he's not here? He's definitely here.
Right. That's a good point, because he's a symbol of the land. Like he's, of the people. And initially he did kind of have support of the people until this massacre occurs that we'll get into. But the cinematography is excellent. And I don't think I realized when the first time I watched it, it's Gianni Di Venanzo, who worked with Antonioni. He did 8.5 for Fellini, which all of those things, in my mind have a much different visual feel than this does. Because at certain points, even on a rewatch, I start thinking God, is this a documentary? The way that it's capturing information.
Yeah, there's a definite Pontecorvo feel to it, a Battle of
Yes.
Algiers feel to it. Occasionally we go to there's a night machine gun attack of a police station which is just so good because they essentially cut the lights of the village, and then you hear the machine guns and you just see the muzzle flashes of the machine guns. And I remember it's one of those things that when something is really striking in a film, I remembered that scene as if it lasted for like 5 minutes, and of course it's over in a flash, literally. But it feels to me like the experience of watching it. It's like, wow, this is really powerful and striking. And so, if you think about it, why not depict it like that? Why set it up cinematically? What would you see at night if someone was machine gunning a place in the middle of nowhere? So it's there are just so many exceptional decisions in how this film is put together and how radical it is. I mean, it feels so modern and so postmodern. Let's tell a biography of a person, but let's leave out his family, his childhood, his origin story, and just have him as this event that this legend that just exists publicly via court proceedings and witness statements, all of whom are entirely unreliable.
It's almost like an unsentimental ballad that for this figure, which is really interesting. And again, I haven't watched Rosie's three previous films, but I don't believe any of them feel like this from what I know. And it's interesting what I did watch last night. Every time we do one of these, it's an opportunity to delve further into the director's filmography that I haven't before. I watched Rosie's last film, The Truce, with John Turturro from 1996.
Primo Levi
Yes.
adaptation.
Holocaust survivor and his arduous journey home. And I believe Turturro gives a good performance in that. But that feels completely different from the style of this and several, mostly through Rosie's work in the 70s that I'm familiar with, because I've seen most of his stuff now. But that felt like a very sentimental swan song compared to this. This feels kind of gritty, and the scene that you mentioned with the gunfire and the lights out, that evokes a sense of terror, even that these things are happening at such a fast pace, and there's really no sense of justice or truth that is available when this film is made, or still even, because I think the records on him are still sealed in Italy. Is that correct? I might be wrong about that, but
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it would. There's something called indietrology, which means it's almost like the philosophy of what's behind everything. I guess conspiracy theories would be the best. And yes, he is a name which is so covered in the fact that you've got the mafia involved and the state at different levels means that your chances of getting the truth are very, very slim indeed, and whatever you think you've heard. And, there will always be these legends of like, oh, yeah, you could always it was very safe in those days because the place was ruled by a certain morality, even though it was a criminal morality. It's which is bizarre in and of itself. But I just want to go back a second to the cinematography, because I do think this is one of the most strikingly beautiful films, and it does show Sicily as this kind of a land made for black and white, for the shadows are black, the ground is burning white. There's a scene in here where they go into a quarry and it almost looks like snow, it's so white. The stone is just like the light is bouncing off it, and then people will be hiding out, and people will have their at one point the army turns up and puts an entire village under curfew and only allows them out for like 1 hour a day to get water and food.
Yeah, they're clanging the bell, time to go out. Oh, I thought there's maybe light comedy, dark comedy in this as well, because is it one of the the carabinieri who wants to commandeer some house, and somebody's like, "Oh no, I recommend you don't take that house. You do this," and he's like dismisses him. He's like, "God, no wonder why you can't get things done around here."
And then gets shot 5 seconds later.
Right? It's like, God, you assholes.
You don't understand how dangerous it is, man. It's just not. They're just going to shoot you. You're not going to.
Right.
Essentially, he's basically saying, because it's the other policeman. It's basically saying he doesn't want to say, but he's basically saying, you've got to warn them that you're coming so they can escape. So don't put them in a corner because they will kill you. And it's which is essentially the police saying, just let's not arrest them.
Yes, just let that shit be, okay? But that's the perfect, because then the immediate scene after that is they get gunned down, and I was laughing, even though I shouldn't be, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then there's this, again, it's that sort of thing, as you were saying, there's sort of this crazy mix that then they take him from this massive, this sunny street, this massive sunlight banging down on these poor soldiers who've just been shot up, and they drag them into like a courtyard. They have to bang on the door and they won't get let in, and then they finally go into this building, and it's all dark because it's the middle of the day and everything's been closed up, and the soldier dies, and it's almost like pietà, he's the way he's sort of lying on the ground, and there's this real moment of, oh my god, that's really tragic, that's really awful. But yeah, it's like you're constantly waiting to have something on which to hang your emotions, and I just love this. I love these Italian filmmakers who nowadays, I was just thinking, can you imagine putting a script of Salvatore Giuliano into like a studio system and saying, here we go, well, here's my new film? It'd be like, where's the third act? Where's the main character? Why don't I like him? Where's the character?
Is that why we got the Cimino film then?
It's very interesting you should mention that, because I watched the Cimino film like 3 weeks ago, which is called The Sicilian, and is a very conventional, romanticized version, to the point that the great crime that he's guilty of, which is this massacre of a May the 1st workers' communist sort of inspired demonstration, which had families there and old people and children and all the rest of it. And I know communist has a sinister sound in America, but in Italy in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, right through to even today, does not have those overtones whatsoever. It's much more like sort of socialism, even that probably has a sinister sound in the US. But in the Cimino version, he's like, oh, who's shooting? Who stopped the shooting? And he's helping the wounded, and it's just like, no, you were the guy who did it. I mean, that's why the Carabinieri are supposed to be working with him, is because they're using him as a thug to sort of like break strikes and kill communists and stuff like that. So he becomes this nationalist, fascist figure, from fighting the fascists as a separatist to fighting the communists as a nationalist. That's his sort of political journey as such. And then you could just call him like, he's just a criminal who's fighting people, and he's using politics as an excuse, really, to put some sort of blazon or gloss on the violence.
Yeah, I only saw that film years ago when it got the Blu-ray release, and I am a Cimino fan, mostly for his first two films. But I felt like that could have been about anybody, is what that feels like. And also the Christopher Lambert performances, and as I recall, it's in English, so yeah. That doesn't help. And then I'm probably biased against Lambert because I grew up in my household. My dad would do Christopher Lambert impressions because he didn't like him, because I think he was married to Diane Lane.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Around the late 80s, early 90s. But my dad I remember randomly would do Christopher Lambert impressions, like, oh, Diane.
My go-to impression of Christopher Lambert would be from Highlander, where he goes, lots of different places. You talk funny, Nash. Where you from? Lots of different places. It's just like you don't
Christopher
have to
Lamb.
you don't have to include all of the places in a single sentence.
Right, just one.
Yeah, just
One
choose one.
example.
Pick a lane. Lots of different places.
Yeah, but yeah. So that's probably what a script would like if this was tried to be made today. I did see there was a 2020 documentary that I didn't have time to watch before this, but I mean, he's still quite a notable figure. So I feel like somebody could maybe revitalize or or resurrect this story in an interesting way. But
But
I don't.
I don't think there would be a way as interesting as this. I mean,
I
I think this is my point: is that it's interesting that Rosie later on went to make Chronicle of a Death Foretold, because this has a similar vibe, that it is basically a meditation on death and identity and violence and who owns the words that are out there about you, and your identity. And you do learn things. Things are sort of revealed in the film. Mysteries are to some degree given an explanation. We follow his career. We follow this up to the point of the massacre. And then we have this extended court scene in which his sort of lieutenants are essentially being tried for that massacre. And there's a degree of it being stitched up, that they're coming out with very automatic responses, and everyone keeps saying, I could tell you more, but I will, but not now. So someday I will reveal what I know, but not now.
Right. Like, it would help right now.
Yeah, exactly. What do you plead again?
I love Italian films, courtroom films, because the setup where they put the defendants behind the cages. I love that. And on the second viewing, I think the courtroom scenes are excellent. And to a degree, did you ever see The Traitor, the Bellocchio film in
Yes,
2019?
yeah. Yes,
I love
excellent.
that film.
Yeah.
The courtroom scenes in that are fantastic, and it was kind of reminding me of that, especially as we start to kind of focus on Pisciotta a bit, played by
Yeah.
the American Frank Wolf, who I I think when I think of that actor, I see him as an older man. I had to, even watching it a second time, I had to look it up, like, oh, that's him, because he seems so young in this, but he kind of becomes the focus and is the centerpiece for the finale, which I think is great.
Absolutely. He's in the end a sort of Judas figure to some
Yes.
degree. And yeah, Pichotta, isn't he? Which has a sort of sounds like it's of course, wasn't he in Once Upon a Time in the West? Wasn't he, like, he was in a lot of spaghetti westerns.
I mean, that and The Great Silence. I mean, two of the best ever made. But yeah,
He plays in Once Upon a Time in the West. He plays the Brett McBain, Claudia Cardinale's husband, who gets killed with his family in the first sort of scene with Frank. They have the house waiting for Claudia Cardinale to show up, and
yes,
Frank shoots everybody, and then somebody says, "What about the kid, Frank?" And Henry Fonda says, "Now you called me by name."
yeah,
Oh my god.
yeah, excellent. I mean, so he's been involved in some, masterpieces. But again, I don't even know if I picked up on that. It was him the first time, but yeah, he's so young in this.
Absolutely, and he just entirely fits in, and he's worked in the Italian film industry for throughout his career in different projects. Yeah, I think he's amazing in this. I think everybody is amazing in this. I think there's no one who sticks out. And going back to that courtroom scene, I mean, I even love the fact that you have them in the cages, and then one of them gives bad evidence, essentially sort of fesses up a little bit, and so when he goes back in the cave, they suddenly all jump on him and start biting his ears. It's just like, who thought that was a good idea? And
No. Yeah, they didn't have that figured out yet.
Maybe we should put them in separate
The
cages.
separate cells, please. Yeah.
But there's a scene where he's giving the verdict. The judge is sort of standing up to read the verdict, and Rosie shoots it from behind, and you see the courtroom, like everybody standing up to hear the verdict, and it is just absolutely so in focus. You know, everybody's face in that courtroom, right to the back of the wall, is in this pristine focus, and it's just. To an extent, it's like, oh, this could be like news footage, but at the same
Yes.
time, it's just almost operatic as well. That there's this huge chorus listening to, you know, this is how it feels to be in the midst of history. You know, to be in the room when something is happening. I just thought that I was just impressed by so many bits of this film, and yet it is a film of episodic bits as well. It is there's dossiers and there's folders and there's a statement, a sort of confession that people are talking about, a memorandum that's going around that Salvatore Giuliano has apparently authored, and so you've just got all these different versions, and then when you the great folding of the film is, of course, Giuliano being murdered and his body being transported back to. So when you've the thing that you've seen at the beginning and the thing that's on the poster of the film is to some degree like artistically produced. It's something that's been placed and framed, and you know. So the thing that you think is the most physical, objective, tactile thing that is Salvatore Giuliano is that's the beginning of the fraud. That's the, you know,
Artificial manipulated. It's and we might never know the truth, which is interesting. You know, that's why I think Rosi is such a great filmmaker, because while he liked to kind of focus on delving into true life conspiracy theory, actual basis for a lot of his narratives, but comparing to the Mattei affair, which I think is also a masterpiece, but it's in such a different style where you know very much get the central figure in almost all of the film. But this is almost more, Salvatore Giuliano feels more troubling in this great unsolved mystery that we'll never quite know and have this profound effect at a certain time that is tangled up in all of these politics that may never be untangled.
Yeah, exactly. But there's the thing is, if you had a scene, because I mean, as well as not visually seeing him, except for as a body or as a figure. I mean, wears this long white coat, so he's actually quite distinct at certain points, but usually in long shot. And the white coat has a little bit of a spaghetti western thing to it as well, you know, with the dusters from Once Upon a Time in the West. But even though you see him quite frequently, you don't you never see, he never says anything. There's no scene, there's no, like, when somebody speaks, then there would be drama because there would be somebody speaking, he would be speaking with someone, there'd be dialogue, there'd be something going, someone, you know, a reply, a response, or a reaction, and you can judge that, you know, he sounds like a bit of an asshole, or that's a good idea, or what, or he's got a sense of humor, or he's charming, he's got charisma. None of those things are available to us, and I just wonder, it's almost like a really interesting thought experiment for a film, to just like, what can you hang on to, and how can you make a film interesting when you deny the audience the very thing that 99% of normal cinema gives them, a normal drama for that matter. And I found that so refreshing. It's just like, oh, we don't need a central character. We could just do it like this.
Yeah, the fury in his absence is what sustains it, and which just recalled you talking about the corpse, really, the produced corpse. That reminds me of another Rosie title, the Illustrious Corpses,
Of course,
with
yeah.
Eva Bocero, which opens similarly. So maybe corpses are also a fetish object for Francesco Rosi, but and because that film, the very striking opening of that is these beautifully, well, these ornately laid out human remains, but and then this kind of conspiracy theory film goes on from there. But it's fascinating. He knows how to sustain interest in a way that most filmmakers cannot and do not.
and cannot and do not with all the conventional tools that they have at their disposal. He's using it. He's doing that without those tools, and I just, it just makes every sort of more conventional film, every biopic or whatever, just feel so tired in comparison. You know, it's sort of like, I mean, not every subject would be necessarily this would be appropriate. I mean, I think you saw it as well in Berlin, the Bill Evans biopic.
Yes.
You know, just okay, they've taken a section of his life and they just concentrate on that. That's that's a nice way of doing it. Or, you know, maybe Blue Moon does it a bit less successfully, but it's still trying to not do, oh, hey, Junior's playing the piano. Oh, that's good, Junior. And then, you know, then he's an old man sitting in a room thinking about his life. You know, I mean, it's a Dewey Cox from Walk Hard story, isn't it? You know,
Yeah. And that film did make me dig Bill Evans.
well, exactly. Yeah, I've been playing it nonstop on my headphones ever since. You know, mission accomplished.
Yes. But yeah, but I mean, it's about getting those two references. I think what they do well is getting into crystallized sense of humanity about the subject, which Rosie almost is compelling, but again, with this film and the Mattei affair, kind of denies that. They're just, these men are symbolic. And even when we get Volante as Mattei, he's still, as I recall from watching that film, he's still more just a symbolic as a person than getting into what he is as a human or a character, even. It's the vortex of everything around him that is defining his importance for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Mattei and his performance, you can't help but be drawn into to some degree by the charisma and the energy of you know, he's always marching around places and ordering stuff and seducing people in a way that's not necessarily sexual, but is seducing them in terms of convincing them to come with him in his mission, you know, to sort of modernize and literally energize Italy in sort of post-war economy. So you do get a sort of, I mean, I think it all goes back to Citizen Kane, doesn't it? That sort of, let's do a biopic, but do it through fragmentary mosaic-like things rather than, you know, a chronological from A to B. And yet you still get, I mean, you get flashbacks within flashbacks here. You get, you know, and the idea of where this film ends as well, with a sort of another political assassination, essentially. And again, another one which, like the rest of the film, as an audience member, you're outside the room. You're locked out, and you're basically outside the doors of the prison infirmary. And I just the balls to just say, as a director, to just go, no, we're not going to show that. We're not going to film that scene. We're just going to. We don't need to. I'm so impressed by that sort of storytelling vision. That this is it's almost like I've got a thesis of how I'm going to do this, and I'm going to stick to it. And I don't care if I bring the audience along. And as it happens, massively consequential film, an important film, regarded by Scorsese as one of his. I think it's in his top 10 of films ever made. This film.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Rightly so, I think. Yeah. But unlike some films that we could talk about, I don't know if this has had anything that it's inspired, going forward, because it just feels so utterly unique.
I mean, it's watching it even from today, it feels like a gamble that this got made the way it was made. I think. And of course, this kind of set Rosie up for the career that he did have with winning Cannes and Venice and many, many other things. But yes, I don't.
I mean, his film directly after this is Hands Over the City with Rod Steiger.
Oh, yeah, with Rod Steiger, which won, I think that won Venice.
It could well have done, yeah. It's an amazing film as well. A whole film about political corruption with another dark, enigmatic character in the center.
Yes, and Rod Steiger kind of fits that role perfect. But as far as Salvatore Giuliano, no, there's nothing that really feels like it's in this style. And if there are things that it's similar to, they are packaged as experimental in today's lingo. That this is a gamble, this is extreme art house even. Like I don't know that Cannes would put this in the competition today, kind of thing, is how it might feel.
That's interesting because, I mean, we're talking about it being received. It was very well received when it was released, but Venice refused it. Venice turned it down, and as you say, it won the Silver Bear in Berlin, but it had originally applied for Venice. So it's yeah, it's funny. It maybe wasn't as you're positively received. It says audiences liked it, and director Martin Scorsese cited Salvatore Giuliano as one of his 12 favorite films of all time. Of course, he chose 12. He's got to have 12 disciples. He's so Catholic.
Oh God, yeah. I wonder. He might think that way, yeah. But I mean, 10 is not enough in my mind either, so it's
Right,
fine.
right, yeah. As long as you got to have 12 days of Christmas. I guess you've got to have some way of extending it a little bit. Yeah, so I mean, I think this is one of my favorite films. I would put it up there as just alongside the Battle of Algiers, where it's not. It's the way it's doing things that feels like it's extending the language and possibility of cinema. And yet at the same time, it's got so many other pleasures. As we've already talked about, the cinematography, the performances, it's so varied in how it moves the camera and how it, tells its story. And it's just so, somebody called it bravura filmmaking, and that's a really good expression, I think.
I agree. As someone, because I watched it just when I was really kind of dipping into Rosie's filmography, I recommend watching it twice. And I don't know that you have to do all kinds of research if you have no idea of the subject or the political situation in Italy at the time. Certainly it helps. But I think it's a film to let wash over you and then I think revisit. And I do agree. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's one of his best films. It's a must-see film. I know it's available on the Criterion Channel for those in the US. I don't know that they have a nice restored Blu-ray of it, though it is certainly deserving of that. But somebody needs to put out a box set of Rosie's work, a comprehensive box set.
Absolutely. The work starts here. We're asking for that. We're asking, please,
Yes.
we want a box set of Rosie, because he's done other films which I don't think even get mentioned, which are really good. He did one about the First World War with it's called, in English, it's called Many Wars Ago, and it's his anti-war film based on a memoir by Emilio Lussu. And in Italian, it's called Uomini contro, which means men against. And that's amazing. Hands Over the City is amazing. Salvatore Giuliano is amazing, we've already said. Christ Up to Eboli, Illustrious Corpses. Three Brothers is pretty good. I mean, I think, when we get to the 80s, he does have, like many people, I think he finds himself sort of stuttering towards the end of his career.
Sure.
But
The Truce, I don't think The Truce is great, but it's more serviceable. He did a film with Sophia Loren. I'm forgetting the title of that. That's one of the few I have not seen, but really fascinating career.
he also did a film, The Palermo Connection. This is 1989, and how 80s can this be that it stars James Belushi and Mimi Rogers?
I saw that. That is one I have not seen either. I don't think it's well. I believe it was not well received, but
No, it doesn't. It does not look. Just from the poster, I mean, look at the names on this though. It was written by Gore Vidal and Tonino Guerra, and Tonino Guerra is one of those names that crops up whenever you put on a film, because basically he co-wrote so many movies with. He wrote a lot with Fellini. He wrote. Let me just give you, this is a right. He wrote The Mattei Affair. He wrote Zabriskie Point. He wrote The Voyeur. He wrote Marriage Italian Style, Red Desert, L'Eclisse, La Notte, L'Avventura, Lucky Luciano, Amarcord. Did I mention that one? Christ Stopped at Eboli, The Night of the Shooting Stars. He wrote with, I mean, this is co-writing because the Taviani brothers obviously wrote that as well. But he's collaborated with so many. But Bellocchio, he's written with Enrico Henry IV. He wrote with Bellocchio. He seems to have been like the writer to go to. You know, he wrote Casanova 70 by Monicelli, and Blow Up with Antonioni as well. He seems to be the sort of Robert Town of Italy, but actually sort of getting the credits rather than sort of working as just a script doctor, but actually getting the credits alongside them.
I mean, that is a resume, Jesus.
Yeah.
But the Belushi film, I did see that. I might try to catch up with that this weekend. I'm sure it's cheesy. I do like Mimi Rogers, though.
Wasn't she married to Tom Cruise? Wasn't she like the first or second Tom Cruise?
Who was the first wife? I think she might have been pre-Scientology. I'm not sure, but God, I just saw her in something recently. Anyway, yeah, that I did notice that. I think it's maybe his lowest rated film on Letterboxd. I happen to see, but I would. That's something that looks fun, but maybe not worth a podcast for. But for research.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna. There's a possibility we're digressing slightly, but I've got a feeling that she might have introduced Tom Cruise to Scientology. Because I think Jim Rogers, her first husband, was a big Scientologist, and I think her father was interested in it as well. Yes. Became an auditor.
Did you? This is further digressing, but one of my favorite Mimi Rogers films is Wedlock with Rutger Hauer. Have you ever seen that?
Oh God, no! That sounds familiar. That's got Joan Chen in it as well.
Yes, it does. If you want a cheesy treat, check that out.
A cheesy treat, which is an edible.
Yes. Actually, I have an edible and a glass of wine and watch that. I think you'll be happy.
Excellent. So from Wedlock to Salvatore Giuliano. I mean, I don't even think we need to say whether this is recommended or not. This is, as I say, I think we were both pretty much on side with this one.
Yes, this is, if you like Italian cinema, if you like cinema, this is something you should see. Yeah,
it definitely should be. I totally agree. It has to be one of those holes which is gaps which is plugged if you haven't seen it yet. And I totally agree with you. You should see some. Rosi generally is absolutely, and also his son has become very famous. Has won the Golden Lion at Venice with his documentary Sacra Gra. He won Berlin with what was that, Fire at Sea? Yeah, and he had one in Venice this year as well, which was like Sotto le nuvole, Below the Clouds, which was a sort of portrait of Napoli. Giancarlo Rosi. I was trying to remember his name, his first name. Quite the legacy in Italian cinema, both father and son. I interviewed Giancarlo as well. Unfortunately, was not here for Francesco.
Oh, well, he died in 2015, I think. So at least he saw his son win Venice, at least.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's something. Yeah, he's been dead a decade.
Absolutely. Well, great talking to you once again, Nicholas.
Likewise, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Arrivederci ragazzi, ci vediamo in un prossimo film.
Lo speriamo.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.